Hi guys, welcome to the very last Fit and Bendy broadcast of January, and also the last one for the Backbend Challenge from the Worldwide Splitters Network. And everybody's almost done with their month of backbends, and there has been a lot of progress. It's really inspiring to see, and you guys are doing a great job, and we have some really good questions today about how to take it another step further. That seems to be what everybody wants to know is what's next. Betty Boop is helping me by dragging her toy across my notes. Thank you, baby. She's so helpful. I don't know what I'd do without her. So we're going to get right into it. The first two questions come to us from Instagram. And the first one's for Ruby. And Ruby, I'm really sorry I didn't get to you last week. Sometimes, organizing. But you have a great question. Ruby's question is, when you're in your bridge, your wheel pose, should you walk your feet towards your hands or your hands towards your feet? And generally my answer is you want to walk your hands towards your feet. And the reason for that is you're working on learning how to get more weight into your feet. You asked about how to find your balance as you start to go deeper into the bridge, as you start to get your hands and feet closer together. And the answer is that you need to be able to get more and more of your weight on your feet. Eventually, your goal is to be able to lift your hands up off the floor. From there, you can come back up to standing or grab onto your ankles, all sorts of fun stuff that you can do from there. But if you start to walk your hands in or your feet in towards your hands, you end up getting more and more weight into your hands. From there, unless you have the skills to be able to lift into a back bend, that's a much more advanced move, but there aren't so many places that you can go from there. I think part of why you're struggling is that you have been blessed with some very long legs, which is great. And I'm sure, oops, the light's falling down. I'm sure it looks great when you're going out on the town, but you want to make sure that when you are in your bridge, you're really able to deeply tuck your pelvis. Thank you.
Good.
It has to go onto the.
Okay.
You want to make sure that you're really deeply tucking your pelvis in order to get more of your weight forward into your feet. Otherwise, the length of your legs as you start to straighten them is going to push you constantly towards your hands. So we all have our body proportions that we're born with, and some have their advantages in certain positions and some have their advantages in others. So that's just part of the fun that you get to have as someone with long, lovely legs. So I hope that helps you out, Ruby. Next, for Ojaseo, I pronounced it in Spanish. I don't know if that's correct, but that's how I would pronounce it. He is asking about a straddle. So although we're primarily talking about backbends here, straddle is always great to work on, and it can help in so many things. And his issue is that he's feeling when he's in a straddle that his back is kind of rounded, that it's hard to sit up really straight. And that's actually a pretty common problem because a lot of us have tightness that comes through the hips up into the lower back, and as the legs open, the back wants to round. So what I recommend working on is actually your butterfly position. So if you're sitting, let me scoot back a little bit so you can really see me. If you're sitting here with your feet together and your knees open, you can start by holding onto your ankles and actively work on pressing your knees down to the floor, because part of what you need to do is strengthen the muscles here on the outside of the hip. And what that will do is as those muscles start to engage more and get stronger, it will start to open up the inside of the hip. Simultaneously, as you press your knees down, you want to think about lifting your body up and trying to lift out of the hips. And as you correctly pointed out, it's very easy to think of trying to pull forward from your upper back, and then you end up with this sort of rounded, hunched position. You actually want to think not so much about forward as lifting up, and feel that lift all the way through your waist, through your back muscles, through your hips, everything lifting up as the knees press down into the floor. And then you start to pick up the hands and just hold your hands there. And as you're doing that, you'll really notice that there's a lot of work that needs to happen in your core and your outer hip muscles and the outside of your legs to try to lift up as the knees go down. If this feels impossible when you're first starting, just put a cushion or a block or something underneath your butt to lift your butt up a little bit higher than your feet. You can do this in your pancake as well. Not helpful, Boop. If you lift your butt up sit on her ball so she can't squeak it. If you lift your butt up a little higher than your feet, then you will have a little bit more room to sort of move in your hips. You can move around a little bit better. So try that out as well. But basically, the strengthening of the outside of the hips and the abs and the obliques to lift you up will really give you a more mobility to be able to move forward, and you won't feel quite so blocked. So try playing around with those ideas and see if that helps. All right. So on to the questions from the split challenge, the back bend challenge. Hey, not helpful. Can you take this, put this somewhere? Thanks. Lots of distractions today, guys. It's action-packed here at Fit and Bendy headquarters. All right. So first question is for Livia. Hello, Livia. Since everybody talks so much about opening the upper back, how about some love for the lower back? Indeed. How does one get more lower back flexibility safely without compressing and potentially damaging the lumbar spine discs? Asking this as a 31-year-old. Well, I started contortion when I was 31, so 31 is a great age to train back bending. The answer is tucking the pelvis. That's how you start to train it without hurting your back. So the problem is, if you are, I'm just going to show this in a lunge because it's easiest to see in a lunge. A lot of times what you see in a lunge is that people are going to sink into the lunge and then try to go back from here. And you can see my lower back is definitely bending, but I'm getting zero bend here in my hips. So what my body's doing is it's traveling forward and then up and then back. And that's going to put a lot of compression into my lower back. I'm really relying on my lower back to do the bending here. What I really want to do is tuck the pelvis under and then go back from here. Now you can see I can immediately get a lot farther back, and that's without any effort at all, because I'm getting the length from the hip flexor in the front here, and my back is going backwards. Now the same would be true if I were doing a back bend with my legs straight or on my knees, wherever I'm doing the back bend. If I allow my pelvis to drop like this and I go straight backward, you can see all my body weight is sitting right here on my lower back. That's going to put a lot of pressure on the lower back. If I tuck the pelvis, I get this length, then I can immediately go a lot further back, and now my body weight is a lot further forward. My body weight is here where I have muscles, and now those muscles will hold me up as I go backwards instead of having no muscle because my abs are just hanging out there and that compression in the back. So if you have that tuck in the pelvis, that's when you can really think about going deeper and deeper into those back bends, but you keep finding that lift, that engagement in the lower abs and the pelvic floor and the obliques, and that push from your downstairs butt that helps those hip flexors lengthen. So that ought to give some love to your lower back. And some people struggle more with the lower back than the upper back. It's not the common thing. The common thing is for the upper back to be more difficult, but everybody's different, and there are so many variations out there. So, you know, you have to find what works for you, but really work on those hip flexors. If you're trying to push into the lower back, you got to lengthen the hip flexors at the same time. All right. Also for Livia, Livia has 2 questions. I saw another member's progress photo here, and she has a photo of a lovely bendy young lady doing a catch ankle. So catch ankle is when you're in bridge and you pick up your hands and you grab your ankles. And so you're in your bridge, but your hands are off the floor, they're grabbing your ankles. So how does this happen? What do you need to work on? Does it have a lot to do with hip flexors, the bane of my existence? Oh, see, how did I know that your hip flexors might need a little bit of work? I must be psychic. So catch ankle is definitely one of the more advanced movements. In fact, a long time ago, I trained with a woman, and I remember asking her, when do I get to call myself a contortionist? And she said, one of the key moves is that catch ankle, where you can catch your ankles and straighten your legs completely. So that's definitely considered an advanced move. And yes, it's a lot of hip flexors because you need to be able to get your weight entirely into your feet and pick your hands up off the floor. And you can't do that without the hip flexibility to get your hips over your feet, or even in front of your feet, right? If they're back here and you try to pick up your hands, you're just going to keep falling down on the floor. So definitely lots and lots of hip flexors. That tuck in the pelvis is important, but it's really your entire spine. It's also a lot of shoulders. Even if your hips are very loose, if your shoulders are very tight, you won't be able to get your arms up off the ground to reach back and grab the ankles. I see a lot of people trying to get into this pose by doing this weird rotational thing, trying to twist and reach around and then grab and pull. And as I've said with other rotational stuff, like the grab for king pigeon, that's not always the best thing for your shoulders. That can really put a lot of stress on your shoulders. You really want to work on just being able to reach back and grab this direction. And that's all about building that active flexibility in the shoulders and upper back. So I haven't seen how your back bends are looking, but so I can't say like, oh yeah, you're really close or you're really far away. I'm not sure, but definitely if hip flexors are a problem for you, I would work those a lot before trying to get into catch ankle. All right, for Allie. Hey, Allie. I don't feel like I'm making much progress in Cobra pose. I'm trying to keep my hips down, push through my upper back, and use my hamstrings to pull my feet closer. Any tips? Why, yes, I do have tips. Hold on. Got a little thing. I do have tips. So we have 2 people asking about Cobra this week and how to progress in Cobra and get deeper. And I have different answers for both of you because you both are kind of in different places with it and have different things going on. For you, Allie, your back is looking really nice. Your upper back is engaged nicely, but you really have nothing bending in the hips. So what's happening in your Cobra, this is totally what my Cobra used to like too, is you're all the way down here and then trying to go back. The more that you can tuck the pelvis under this direction and walk the hands in closer, trying to tuck the pelvis. So that's not squeezing your butt's relaxed. It's engaging right underneath your butt and then lifting from your abs to try to tuck the pelvis under and then go up and back from there. So separately stretching your hip flexors and also your quads. So doing some quad stretches, bringing your heel to your butt is going to start to make that a lot easier. Also strengthening your hamstrings, because without hamstring strength, you won't be able to get that push, to get the tuck, to get the lift. So the strength in the backs of the legs and the lower abs are definitely part of what will make that possible for you. So that's what I suggest that you work on, because everything else is looking really nice. And I think if you can find more of that tuck, you'll see a lot more progress. So the second Cobra question comes from Samantha. Samantha is also asking about how to get deeper into Cobra. And you look like you have a nice tuck in the pelvis. Your spine is bending beautifully. You've got an upper back bend. Your chest is really open. So you're doing everything right. And often there comes a point with Cobra where, okay, you're in your back bend. You're like, okay, now what next? And you're at that point. So you can put blocks underneath your hands. Elevating your hands enables you to have a longer reach to help you push your body up and back even further. I find that really helpful. You can do a block under the hips. I'm not sure how helpful that would be for you, because usually that's to open up the hips, but your hips are already looking pretty good. You can work on bending your feet up and touching them to your head, and that's going to get deeper into the hips and quads. And another really fun thing to try is to work on moving one hand into the center of your body and lifting up the other arm and trying to reach back and try to touch your feet, or just reach back and hold, and switch arms, do the other one, reach back and try to hold. Instead of trying to reach out to the side, just try to lift that arm straight up back by your ear and reach straight back and try to really engage through the upper back. And eventually the goal, of course, is to be able to lift both arms up and reach back and hold that position in your Cobra. And that takes a lot of strength. So starting by just lifting one arm up at a time and holding it for time, seeing how long you can hold it. Find those muscles in the upper back and the hips and the back of the legs that will hold you in that position. Doing that will start to build that strength. Also being able to just grab that foot is a good preparation for starting to bring that foot forward, pulling it forward over your head, straightening back, going into a sort of catch ankle on the floor, extended Cobra. So those are some places you can go from here, but I would say that your form is looking really good. Next question. Esmeralda. Esmeralda has always some very good questions. When you go from the bridge to the forearm bridge, what is the alignment of the shoulders? How wide do they need to be? And when I try to lift my head and engage my upper back instead of leaning forward, I feel discomfort in my shoulders. Okay, so let's talk about this. So when you're in your forearm bridge, it is very important that you not have your elbows going out to the side and your hands coming together, right? Because once you start to sink into the position like this, what happens is the shoulders round in. Then when you try to lift your head and you try to push into it, you can see why it would be pinching, because this does not look comfortable, does it? I don't think it looks comfortable. It doesn't feel comfortable. So, if I'm trying to lift from this position, I have nowhere to go. So you always want to make sure that the elbows are right underneath the shoulders. The forearm should be parallel. And that is going to bring the shoulders into an externally rotated position. So this is internally rotated. This is externally rotated. This is where you want the shoulders to be. So as soon as you start to notice those elbows sliding out, you know you're not going to the right place. Keep pulling them in. And from here, slide the shoulder blades down the back and try to lift the head. I'm not going to go all the way into the pose, but I can show you what this would look like just in the forearms. And this is a really good way to practice the position. So you can see if I put my elbows out to the side here and my shoulders up, and then I try to lift my head, there's no place for me to go. I'm just running right up against my upper trapezius, which is kind of hunched up against my head. If I pull my elbows in and slide the shoulders, Poop, you're blocking. She's so helpful. Slide the shoulders down and lift the head up. Now you see I can get my head up so much more. I have some place to go to lift my head up and move my shoulders forward. So you always want to have this feeling of sliding the elbows in towards each other in order to lift the head up so they stay right underneath the shoulder. So work on that position. If you're feeling that pinchy feeling, don't push into it. It's not supposed to feel that way. That's not something you just push through. That's your shoulder saying, stop, I don't like this. So listen to your shoulders. Try to reconfigure the position. Work on it just the way I did without being in the bridge, and see if you can feel the difference between here and here. And then try it again from the bridge when you're in a bendier position. But sometimes it's helpful to try something not in the bridge first, because it's easier to feel what your body's doing when you're not also wrapping your spine around your head. So second question for Esmeralda. I used to do back bending 3 times a week, 2 light or medium sessions and 1 harder session, so my back can relax and be nice wherever I stretched it. With the challenge, now I do 5 sessions, and I do them a little bit more easygoing, not too much pushing, so that my back doesn't feel so sore and angry. What do you recommend when the challenge ends? Go back to what I used to train, or maybe stay with 4 days? I would say listen to your back. I mean, different people benefit from different training schedules. And one of the things I've written about in my blog, and I tell all my students, is your body is your best teacher. So what works for me might not work for you. My back is happier when I stretch it at least 4 or 5 days a week. I used to stretch it 6 days a week, sometimes 7, which is overkill. I don't recommend not taking a day off. You should take 1 day off. But other people, their backs will seize up and get really cranky if they stretch more than 3 days a week. So see how you feel after this challenge. Did you feel that stretching a little bit lighter but more days gave you better progress and worked better for you? Dog almost on my computer. She is so hyper today. Did that feel better for you? If that felt better for you, then I recommend sticking with what works, right? Because that's your body's telling you that it likes to train more often. If you felt like you made more progress, maybe pushing a little harder, but taking more rest days, go back to that. Play around with it. Try 4 days a week. You know, I really recommend keeping a journal, and you write what you did, how hard you pushed, how hard you worked, how long you trained, and then also how you feel afterwards. And if you notice like lots of like red letter ouchie days, then maybe something needs to be adjusted. Maybe you need to train less often, maybe you need to push less hard, maybe you train more often but less hard. Play around with it and find the schedule that works best for you. And that goes for all of you. Find what works best for you. There is no one size fits all for this training. Amanda, I have 2 fused discs in my back. one in my cervical spine and one in my lumbar spine. My question is, will this limit my mobility and how far I can potentially get my flexibility in my back? I mean, ultimately, yes, a fused spine is definitely going to limit your mobility because those two vertebrae aren't going to bend. Now, in terms of how much this is going to limit your training, it's really hard to say because it depends on how much all of the rest of your vertebrae are willing to pick up the slack. You will always have to be careful around those two vertebrae. I would be very careful if you're going deep into contortion training, especially if you're ever working with a coach who's trying to push you into things. That can be very bad for people who have fused vertebrae. So you're going to have to go a little bit slower and be a little bit more careful and really be careful about your alignment. And one thing that you can work on is getting more hip and shoulder flexibility, because a lot of times people who we think of as having a tremendous amount of back flexibility are actually mostly hip and shoulder flexible, or even just hip flexible. There are a lot of things that you can do just from having flexible hips that you don't need the world's bendiest spine for. So don't be discouraged by that, but just see it as an opportunity to work on some other things that also might be helpful and help get you to where you want to be and help you meet your goals without compromising your health or the health of your spine. It's also going to be really helpful to knowing that those are the two areas that are most likely to bend backwards, that working on the upper back flexibility where you don't have a fused disc is going to be very helpful in moving you forward. So this is a great opportunity to not just rely on those places that most people rely on for their flexibility, but to challenge yourself to make a healthier back bend for you. So, hey, learning opportunities. And last question for Sabine. I read that you're in the hospital. I hope you're okay. I hope it's nothing serious and you get out soon. Feel better. So Sabine's question is for the difference between a lunge back bend and a king pigeon back bend. So she's found in her lunge back bend that it's much easier for her to tuck her pelvis and get that up and over feeling that we were just talking about. And it's a lot harder in king pigeon back bend. So that the lunge back bend, I have every dog toy here, just in case you guys want to see the dog toys, they're all here. So for the lunge back bend, you're here, you tuck the pelvis and go up and over from here. For the king pigeon back bend, this front leg is bent on the floor and you're gonna go up and over. You see, this is a much more difficult place for me to lift out of that front hip. Because this leg is externally rotated, I don't get any push and lift from that. I've got a lot more compression in this hip, and that's just because with the external rotation of that leg that you're sitting on, it's just not going to tuck as easily. That's a really bizarre position to try to tuck your hips from. I'm honestly, I think I said this before, I'm not a huge fan of that king pigeon pose as a beginner intermediate pose because it's a lot harder than it looks. The other thing is, Sabine, because of the tightness in your external rotation, your butt isn't all the way on the floor in your king pigeon. So you're putting a lot of pressure on that front hip by having it hovering there off the floor as you're trying to do your back bend. So I'd say at the very least in your king pigeon in the short term, put a yoga block underneath your butt while you're doing it. And that will at least give you a little bit more leverage to tuck that pelvis and lift up and out for your back bend. Your lunge back bend looks gorgeous. It's perfect. The position looks fantastic. I love it. It looks like you've got a really good support from the pelvis there. But with the king pigeon, just adding that external rotation in the front leg, I think is just not putting your hips in an optimal position. And with certain pelvic structures, that's just, it doesn't work great. It doesn't work great for my hips either. It takes a lot more warming up to be able to get the hips in the right position, get the tuck and get the lift. And it's never gonna go as far. So I would say for now, really focus on the lunge back bend. I think that's just gonna be a much better move for you. And in the king pigeon, if you really insist on doing it, put a yoga block under your butt. Have some support for that front hip and use that support to try to find the tuck. But it's just not gonna be the same. It's probably never gonna be the same. But the more you work the external rotation, so work on pigeon without the back bend, it will probably make that a little bit easier. So that's all for today, and congratulations to everybody who did this challenge. You guys have done some amazing work, and I look forward to meeting the winners when you guys email me for your prizes. All right, have a great weekend, and I will see you in February. Take care.